It was the year 1967. The US, currently enrolled in fighting against the North Vietnamese in an attempt to contain its communist beliefs, was heavily backed by the pro-war morale of the citizens. However, in the span of a single year, that all changed. Before the war had even begun, Ho Chi Minh, leader of North Vietnam, had come to the US for aid in becoming independent from French sovereignty. Sending numerous letters to the US officials and being denied all the same, Minh was forced to side with communist superpowers to regain control of his country. By finally gaining independence in 1954, the US now saw North Vietnam as a threat to capitalism as a newly communist nation, thus sparking the start of the Vietnam War on November 1st, 1955. Under the beliefs of the domino theory, a theory stating that if one country fell to communism, others would fall with it, the US was able to ignite a national support for the war. However, as seen today, the domino theory was heavily flawed, as explained by Edwin Moyse, professor and Vietnam War historian at Clemson University.
It was a big logical fallacy. The simplest way I could put it is that to believe the domino theory, if you really thought about what the domino theory was saying, to believe it, you had to believe that for the communists to get control of Vietnam was going to make a bigger difference to the balance of power than the communists getting control of China. And that was insane. Vietnam was not more important than China. The fall of China had not triggered the fall of a whole bunch of other countries. And even countries bordering on China. Take Burma, for example. Directly border on China. The fall of China to communism had not caused Burma to fall or even to wobble. Fall of South Vietnam, which wasn't even close to bordering on Burma, was supposed to cause Burma to be doomed. That was stupid. The United States the U.S. government was wildly exaggerating the extent to which communist control of Vietnam would be a hazard to the United States.
Nonetheless, the US used these extreme ideas as the backbone for their reasons of fighting in Vietnam, and as a result, they herded US citizens into support of the war using fear.
So when somebody says, let us stop the bombing, he's not talking about let us save civilian lives. He's asking you for a very simple thing. Be my partner in murdering American youth.
Knowing that support for the war wouldn't last forever, the government orchestrated propaganda through the United States Information Agency, USIA, to maintain public support of the Vietnam War. The USIA's propaganda had worked stunningly well, effectively combating communist propaganda of the US while implanting the idea that they were working to make a better world in the minds of millions. The USIA was given the support to monopolize the entire media and disguised propaganda through book publication, radio, television, documentaries, and many other forms to create a facade of support for the war. Additionally, the US skewed many of the facts regarding the Vietnam War. Numbers of offensive Viet Minh were reported as showing a downward trend, when in actuality they were being replaced much faster than the US had anticipated. In correlation with the reports of falling enemy troops, they reported that many communist fighters were too weakened for combat, and that morale was dissipating fast. However, on January 30th, 1968, the Viet Minh launched a counterattack, the Tet Offensive, proving the reports false.
The new communist campaign in Vietnam continues. Just after midnight their time, a band of Viet Cong raiders blew up a power installation and attacked 2 police stations in Saigon. Other small bands still roam the city. The Viet Cong are reported to be in complete control of a militant Buddhist headquarters less than a mile from the center of town, and there are reports that the National Liberation Front has formed a revolutionary council to run Saigon.
Despite the movement being a total military failure, leading to the loss of countless Viet Minh lives, the reckless push irrevocably changed the US public's heart for the war. The pro-war foundations the USIA had gradually built in the public's mind were shattered as US citizens realized the extent of lies their own government used to manipulate their opinions of the war. With the public split equally between new pro-war hawks and pro-peace doves, the US would be forced on a downward spiral until the end of the war. The deafening uproar of American citizens was heard throughout the nation. Americans were scared, annoyed, and fed up with being lied to by their own government. But the Tet Offensive was just the beginning of a long unraveling of lies that the USIA permeated into the minds of Americans.
I got a Silver Star, Purple Heart, Army Commendation Medal, 8 Air Medals, National Defense, and the rest of this garbage. It doesn't mean a thing.
On March 16, 1968, in South Vietnam, American soldiers brutally murdered over 400 innocent citizens, including many elderly women and children. Hundreds of Vietnamese are left dead in the streets. Most women were found raped and their bodies annihilated. This was the My Lai Massacre, the most gruesome event in the Vietnam War. Despite the barbaric actions of the soldiers, only one man was ever convicted of murder, and he served shy of 4 years under house arrest. As news of the massacre finally reached America in November 1969, it was met with a chorus of anger and devastation. Support for the war dwindled, stripping the USIA from any power it once had. And according to Dr. Kenneth Hoffman, former lieutenant and professor at Seton Hall University, the constant barrage of war news did have an impact on the outcome of the war, especially when Walter Cronkite, an anchorman for CBS, and personal comments delivered to his news audience came out against the war.
To say that we are closer to victory today is to believe, in the face of the evidence, the optimists who have been wrong in the past. To suggest we are on the edge of defeat is to yield to unreasonable pessimism. To say that we are mired in stalemate seems the only realistic, if unsatisfactory, conclusion. On the off chance that military and political analysts are right, in the next few months we must test the enemy's intentions in case this is indeed his last big gasp before negotiations. But it is increasingly clear to this report that the only rational way out then will be to negotiate, not as victims, but as an honorable people who lived up to their pledge to defend democracy and did the best they could.
American soldiers grew into the title baby killers, and any grains of support for the Vietnam War fell from the US's hands. American citizens fought for an immediate withdrawal of the war, but the US government still believed that there was a chance of preventing Vietnam from falling into communism. Once again, United States officials attempted to train South Vietnam soldiers, but it only pushed back the inevitable cease of the war. April 30th, 1975. With the fall of the Saigon to communist rule, American officials compromised with their citizens and completely ceased involvement overseas. But the withdrawal was far too late. Vietnam fell to communism, making all 2 million lives lost in the war effort in vain. Vietnam suffered from numerous tragedies, including the My Lai Massacre, and Americans created a national distrust in their own government, a skepticism still lasting to the modern day. The compromise devised by the American government did more harm than good, and it crippled the nation for decades to come. The lies produced by the American government and the USIA did much more than deceive a nation. They tore America apart.